Well, thanks for tuning into this broadcast. There's a lot of developments that are arguably going to happen for the power sector. There's a lot of talk of a reform package also being given, maybe something being done for discoms, a new set of reforms to help the ailing power sector. There was a note, I mean, there was a report that came in about the reissuance of a softer draft for the amendments to the Electricity Act. So there's so much news that it becomes difficult to figure out what is the most important piece of news to watch out for that could have a significant impact, and if there's something that can be done along with it. Let's get in Mr. Vinayak Chatterjee to talk about all of this. Frankly, with him, we can talk about multiple factors, but Mr. Chatterjee, for today, I would love to restrict this conversation to the power space. We leave infrastructure for some other day. Just wondering, you would have looked at all of these things, including the software draft, etc., etc. What has been the key point that has stood out for you that, if implemented, could have significant impacts?
Look, let's look in the current situation, let's look at the very, very short term, that is today and tomorrow. The issue is that the plant load factor of the generators has fallen to a historic low for two reasons. One, obviously, is the crash of economic activity, and the other is the DISCOM's inability to pay for the power. The current PLF hovers anywhere between 50 to 55%, which is a historic low. And I think the immediate measure is to provide cash relief to the DISCOMs who have not been able to collect their dues across the latter part of March and the whole of April, and likely to be the whole of May also, depending on how it goes. So even before the COVID, the DISCOMs owed the generators up to 90,000 crores. So right now, I think a package is being shaped to provide 90,000 crores worth of loans through PFC and REC, because the banking sector certainly won't lend to a stressed sector. So the immediate requirement is to disburse this 90,000 crores through PFC, REC, so that the country doesn't have blackouts in different parts of the country. And the generators are able to receive their payment and support the DISCOMs, and we are able to abet and aid the recovery in the economic cycle. Let me stop here before I go on to the medium term, which is the reforms that you talked about. Or would you like me to carry on?
No, please carry on, Mr. Chatterjee.
Okay. So now, having solved or attempted to solve the immediate cash flow crisis and its resultant situation on power supplies, let's look at the short to medium term as distinct from immediate. As you did rightly point out, that there is now an amendment to the Central Electricity Act called the Amendment 2020. And it has significant elements that affect DISCOMs. In my view, the significant points are that, in one, it practically forces DISCOMs to employ private sector in an input franchisee mode, which is very welcome and probably the biggest solution to the operational inefficiencies of DISCOMs in terms of their billing and collections and cycle. So that is one big reform based on which the center will or will not release funds. The second is actually the setting up of a central level contract enforcement agency. Because there have been a spate of issues where state governments have reneged on their contracts to power suppliers, including to renewables. And that has gone out of hand in particular states that have created an international furor among investors in the power sector. Now, the Central Contract Enforcement Agency, while it is a good idea in practice, has led to a lot of doubts being cast on the space between various regulators. We already have the state regulators and their twin, which is the state appellate authority. Then we have CERC at the center. We have the civil courts. Now, what will this new agency do and how will its powers overlap? I think the industry is looking forward to a clarification on this area. The third major pillar of the reform is to stop all elements that have completely traumatized the setting of tariffs, which is a spate of irrational tariffs, cross-subsidization, etc., which has led to a maze of incomprehensible commercial format. So the rationalization of tariffs has to be done, and any subsidies that are to be given to targeted segments of the population should be separately provided for by the state governments and remitted to the DISCOMs. But no playing around with tariffs anymore, as Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramaniam had pointed out in his economic survey 3 years ago. some states have as many as 75 to 84 tariff clarifications, including some funny ones, I don't want to name the state, that has a separate tariff clarification for rabbit farms and mushroom farms. This is mentioned in the economic survey. So all these irrationalities in tariff setting have to be removed. These are my three broad takeaways on the reforms, but let me stop here.
Okay. Now, there is this, I wonder how do you see the merits or demerits of having some bit of money flowing in to the discoms on an immediate basis via some package or otherwise, because that helps the producers, because otherwise the states are anyways not paying them. So there is a lot of to and fro out there. What are your thoughts here? What's the best shape or form in which any kind of package like this could come in? Because let's face it, India as a country has a very stretched balance sheet as is.
Look, there is no question that electricity is an essential input to economic recovery as well as to households surviving both personally and economically on their own. Without electricity, from hospitals to nursing homes to everything else, the country will lock down. So at this point of time, I don't think there is any debate other than the fact that this liquidity must immediately be made available to the discoms. And without waiting for any preconditionalities or anything else, just make the money available. The costs of not making it available are too high to imagine. So my point is very simple. We don't have a choice right now. So far as other benefits to the discoms in terms of future loans, grants, etc., should be made conditional to satisfying the conditions of the revised Central Electricity Act 2020. There I'm pretty clear that more relief should not be given to discoms unless they fall in line. That's my short point.
Okay, but you would reckon that, I mean, is there a thought that you have on the size of the sum? I think the conversation that we learned was that it could be something around 90,000 odd crores, which could be done.
I am looking at 90,000 crores right now in stage one, and that will take care of the backlog because what the discoms or the generators is somewhere around that level. But remember that outstandings will also build up in the months of May and June, with almost 60% of the economic producing areas of the country in red zones. You know, areas like NCR, Mumbai, Pune, Indore, Ahmedabad, etc. So I foresee that even across the months of May and June, the discoms will have a huge problem in collecting cash from their customers. So in many senses, I think this 90,000 crores is to be released immediately to cover the backlog. But I suppose another tranche of 40,000 crores would be required towards the end of June, for which the central government should make provisions right now.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think a bunch of these pockets but require the money, but maybe this one, as Mr. Chatterjee said, probably a very crucial one as well. Just a small throwback to something that was the talk about 6 months back, Mr. Chatterjee, and you believe that it has made some progress or could make some progress, and that was the coal reform, wherein there's this whole movement to get in foreign players as well to invest into coal mining in India, and that will really solve a number of these issues for a sector which has been plagued. Have you seen any movement there? Are you in favor of that? How soon should we move on that?
Look, I have not noticed any movement in recent times. However, the principle that coal mining should be denationalized completely and thrown open to the private sector is beyond question. I think parliamentary committee after parliament committee, policy report after policy report has advocated that. And I think the government had made certain moves in that direction. I'm not so concerned whether it's foreign investment or domestic investment, as long as it's thrown open for private sector activities and done in a far less cumbersome manner than in the past. I think in going forward in terms of opening up the coal sector, I think you should make it completely market-driven and not linked to a bureaucratic maze of linkages for this sector and reservations for that sector, a separate reserve price for this sector and a separate reserve price for that sector. You should just identify pockets of mines and leave it to the market forces in terms of what value people see there. One should avoid the temptation of too much bureaucratization and market intervention from the government. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Any last observations? I've asked you about pointers that I wanted you to speak on, Mr. Chatterjee. Anything that you believe is an add-on that I haven't asked you, but you believe should be done or can be done in order to facilitate the space?
Look, I have been writing articles in Business Standard to propagate a particularly out-of-the-box point of view, which earlier did not get much traction, but I can see that now it is gaining traction. I have said this is a moment in history for India's New Deal, just like Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal for America after the Great Depression. This is India's moment in history to think outside the box, and I am strongly advocating that we immediately float an out-of-the-box fund called the National Renewal Fund, tantamounting to 15% of GDP or 30 lakh crores, which to my mind it should be a 50-year fund with a 10-year moratorium, and 60% of it should come from government printing more money through the RBI, and 40% should come from cheap foreign borrowing. It should be a 50-year fund which should be wound down by a 1% cess on direct and indirect taxes from year 11 to year 50. And this 30 lakh crores should provide a massive boost to all the obligations that we are being placed before the government, from the vulnerable sections of society to financial sector bailouts to specific economic bailouts to agricultural sector to healthcare. Now, 30 lakh crores, a simple back-of-the-envelope calculation would show that this is the amount that's required. And I'm a little surprised that most economic proponents are talking of anything between 3% to 9% of GDP. It is grossly inadequate, and the time has come for India to think outside the box and have a new deal for itself. And the target is 15% of GDP or 30 lakh crores. But let me stop here.
Okay, and we will have to stop here because we run out of time. There's an interaction lined up, Mr. Chatterjee, up ahead. But thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us today.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed speaking to you.
And viewers, thanks for tuning into this broadcast.